All right, so let's talk about something that's kind of controversial and stuff. I mean, I made a huge sound recording about this and stuff. This kind of gives you a break from that so I can get into it more and stuff. There's a lot of confusion about how civilian life is like just so much better than the military, military, because, in the military it's a 24/7 emergency service and stuff. You have long hours and stuff, blah, blah, blah. I'm here to tell you that in a lot of cases, civilian life is worse. Most of the time, civilian life is worse and stuff. There's a reason why Warhammer 40k resonates with so many people. It's because it gets civilian life pretty spot on, actually. Um, but hey, there's a cost to choosing to be a civilian, right? But anyway, so let's just go into this and stuff. Just again, this is just to remind the people who think that it's a better idea to just leave the military or not go and stuff. I hate to break it to you, from a person who's been a civilian for 33, almost 34 years and stuff. This shit sucks. I'm telling you. So, and I'm gonna show you why. Um, Whatever. Okay, so again, many people feel stress as a result of not only biological stressors in the military, mainly concerning compensation, sleep, work demands, and the heavy acetaminophen, driving personnel to want to be, which drives personnel to want to become civilians again. It's time that a civilian was more open about the realities and stuff. And these are only some of so what are the other stressors, like the stresses on your relationships and friendships, perceived notions of politics that get like magnified and stuff, and other emotional stressors that get magnified as a result of being in service and stuff. Of and Then you're taking time away from your hobbies and stuff too, and then maybe you already had a kid before you went in, or maybe you got baby trapped when you're in the service or something. But regardless of whether you love the kid or not, if you already have the kid, you should love the kid and stuff. If you already have a kid, you never ever turn your back on your kids, ever and stuff. That Not just for legal reasons, but for all the other reasons and stuff. Um, you know, not that I have kids and stuff. I understand, but I understand what it's like to have kids and stuff. But kids are kids. They're innocent and stuff. You can't. Anyway, so um, yeah. So I'm just here to be more open about the realities of this stuff. I mean, I guess I kind of overlooked the detail. Like some people, they lose their girlfriend in the service, or they find their girlfriend cheating on them, or so, or maybe and of course, maybe the men cheat a lot and stuff. But yeah, it is what it is. All right, so yeah, yeah, for civilians, job hunting takes longer and stuff. Yeah, switching jobs can mean 3 weeks up to 1 year of no paychecks and stuff. Some people take several years of no paychecks. Some people take several years of uh, just to find the job and stuff. It's brutal and stuff. If you do it really tight and quick, it's like 3 weeks to 2 months of no paychecks, and that's brutal. Um, Less legal assistance and stuff. Yeah. More expensive loans, lower quality of health care. Yep. No benefits of veterans or military personnel scheduling and stuff. You know, it's not just plain boarding where they get advanced scheduling. There's other things. Not to say that veterans have some cushy life. No, they don't. And stuff. Plenty of VA claims get denied. I'm going to do my best to make a good video on VA claims and stuff, and for people that are struggling with that. Because a lot of veterans, for one reason or another, have trouble navigating the process. It could be for so many reasons, not just health reasons. So here we go. Less solidarity in a larger scale. Yeah, there's not a lot of solidarity with civilians and stuff. Like even in a civilian household with family members, there's not necessarily solidarity and stuff and cooperation. More expensive cost of living and stuff. And mind you, 95% of civilians would not medically qualify for military service. Okay, there's that too. Think about that. Um, I mean, not that that's an accurate, that's a good statistic and stuff, but I guess it's something to think about. It's a start. Um, Less physical safety. Um, Less spousal protections for married personnel. Yep. But if you're thinking of getting married while you're after you join the service, I would heavily reconsider that. So I have to remind people this is a 24 military is a 24/7 emergency service and stuff. The mission is going to come before a lot of things that are optional and stuff, and you're going to have to, it's better to, and it's an emotionally difficult decision, but hey, it's what you have to do. Your girlfriend, your partner, whatever, is going to have to understand and deal with it, and if they can't, they can't, but marriage is a real minefield and stuff. Kids too and stuff. Like if you decide to have kids or have more kids while you're in the service, I would heavily reconsider that, because that just divides your attention more and stuff. I know people who were in the service and stuff that didn't see their kid for the first time until the kid was already several years old. That's just one possibility you're inviting and stuff. More genetic problems in the breeding pool. Yeah, if you're civilian dating other civilians and stuff, they're not as healthy as fresh military personnel going in. Say what you want about the E4 Mafia, at least they're healthy. Much harder to do 8 years selective service requirement. Yeah. Civilian selective service is tough to get into. So it really is. But here's some of the reasons. I've said more than enough, and I understand this is controversial, disturbing, and stuff. You may think that I'm being personally attacking of somebody's views or beliefs and stuff, but I just really want people to understand that if you're military personnel and you're in the service and stuff, don't think it's going to be sunnier in civilian life and stuff, unless your family are millionaires or billionaires and stuff. But it's just how it is.
So if people haven't noticed and stuff, I heavily believe in education and in the importance of the mind, not only in life, but in civilization and stuff. And its non-negotiable value that seems to almost perfectly scale linearly and stuff. And I tend to have a very favorable view of intelligence and stuff. But there's still some important things you got to understand and stuff. Like when it comes to that type of a value and stuff, and you put it in the context of the military and stuff, the military is still a 24/7 essential emergency service. There needs to always be a standing, active military that has pretty much every country on earth scared to death to even breathe in the wrong direction and stuff. Just perpetually. That's basically part of the name of the game. Obviously, you don't want to scare them in the wrong way to where somebody pushes a nuclear button or something. But, so with that and stuff, it's just like, it's like a value that just stems from that fact and stuff. And for this reason, I have to talk about how important it is for people to not glorify civilian life for some very factual reasons. These aren't just reasons that I know from my experience and stuff. These are reasons that are true, and we could talk about the empirics all we want and say, oh, if this is true, there's going to be empirical data to back it up and blah, blah, blah. There's already data. It doesn't necessarily need to be empirical. Too fucking bad. Not everything's an empirical study all the time, Anyway, so with that, let's talk about this. Like, civilian life is no peach. Like if you're not a millionaire or a billionaire, it's basically like a rotten grape, actually. Like, think about this. Once you go from the military and stuff to the civilian world, obviously I'm addressing people who qualify for honorable discharge and stuff, or, medical discharge and stuff. People, people who are of a protected status, so protectable status and stuff. Once you decide to transition from military to civilian life, what you're basically saying is you agree to civilian quality of healthcare and stuff, being deprioritized in favor of veterans, having access to inferior schools, arguably having less freedom and stuff because your life's more expensive, and so on and so forth and stuff. I look at the basic food in the military, which I've eaten many times and stuff, compared to the basic food of civilians, and the quality doesn't even compare. The basic food of the military and stuff is so much far ahead in quality and stuff. You don't get inflammation, you don't get GI symptoms and stuff. You get quite a bit of energy and stuff. It's rich in vitamins and stuff. Their iodized salt probably doesn't even cause thyroid problems. How about that? And the list goes on. There's privileges and freedoms that you get in the military too and stuff. So, but how do you address this issue and stuff? Just all the ugliness in the civilian world. Well, you do your 8 years, regardless of how that contract is made and stuff, and then you decide if you want to do it again and stuff. Don't get yourself trapped perpetually in contracts and stuff. So, don't get yourself trapped perpetually in stuff you can't get out of and stuff. Marriage, loans, early re-ups, that type of thing. Because you never know when somebody or something's going to make your life hell, And yeah, that's the starter. And I'll append this with more information and stuff, because this is a very important topic. And people in the military have to understand how ugly and fucked up it can get in the civilian world. I can't talk about the military world too much, not only because it's a sensitive area, but two, because I haven't been in the military. Have I been to military school? Yes. Have I lived around military and with military veterans? Yes. Have I tutored military? Yes. Have I studied military science and some military history? Yes. Have I graduated from 2 military schools? Yes. I know quite a bit and stuff. There's probably a lot of Army, Navy, Air Force brats and stuff that would say that I know quite a bit and stuff as an accurate report of fact and stuff. But so I'm just sticking to civilian life and stuff to let the service members know that they're not necessarily missing out if they want to chit out, admin out, PCS out, whatever they want to call it. It's a respective to the occupation class, socioeconomic status, whatever and stuff. I'll be appending this video to show further why, it's better to just, fix the issues going on with your experience there and stuff. If it means you need to improve your training, retrain, whatever, do it and stuff. But, give yourself initiative and the good energy to serve with all you got and stuff. And, you know, if you could, and if you're in the position to give the fruits of your achievements to others to make things better there, do it, you know? Yeah. And this is really, I mean, I really wish people talked about this more and stuff. You know, people talk about how great civilian life is and everything. It is if you're a very protected and privileged class and stuff. Like, but me, like, I'm very educated and stuff, but things really aren't that good for me. Honestly. Like, there's quite a few things in my life that chat me every day that I'd love to fix and get rid of and stuff. You know, even as a college graduate from military school, I was making like $12.50 an hour. It was horrible. And then I had to pay like $675 rent and stuff. You know, it made life hopeless. And my job got taken away after I graduated because of the COVID pandemic and stuff. My job was given to, drum roll, military officers and people in the military who, you know, were scheduled before me, you know, and were prioritized before me. I was just looked at as some piece of shit, even though I could do the job just as well as them or better. Honestly, you know. But yeah, that's some of civilian life for you. You know, there's a lot of cruelty and meanness that happens in the corporate world, the commercial world. You know, the plutocratic world. But yeah, I'll be appending this video to show you more of how freaking ugly it can get in the civilian world. It'll make you think twice about wanting to leave the military for this absolute shit pile that is the civilian world.